Hi guys, and welcome to the first episode in my series on international trade. In this video we're going to be looking at the effect of a tariff in partial equilibrium. Partial equilibrium simply refers to the fact that we are looking at one good in equilibrium, not the whole economy. This is a tutorial produced by Economics Alex, and I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please like this video and follow me on Facebook if you want more economics related news. So we're going to lay out the assumptions in our model, and we're going to be using a standard neoclassical approach. There are various other approaches that we can analyse this problem, but firstly we're going to look at the neoclassical approach. The first assumption is that we're looking at a small country. This means that this country does not have any effect on the world price, and therefore when we look at the foreign export supply curve in the following diagram, this will be completely horizontal. We're also going to assume the first best conditions. This means that there's perfect substitutability between imported and domestic competing goods. This is really important because then if we increase the exports of one country into our country, that means that we can produce less because we're all producing perfectly substitutable goods. And that really makes our analysis really simple when we're comparing domestic and foreign producers interchangeably. We're going to be assuming perfect competition in product and factor markets. This is so to ignore the effects of sort of brand competition, for example, and how that confuses our models. We're going to also assume no externalities. This is just a simplifying assumption and sort of simplifies the way that we can look at the problem. We're going to say that a tariff of plus T units is applied to each unit of imports, and this is placed at the border, so therefore this increases the price into that home market. We say that consumer surplus and producer surplus are expressed in dollars, and these can be interchanged. What I mean by this is that a $1 increase in producer surplus and a $1 decrease in consumer surplus would be a zero-sum game. You could argue that this would be unrealistic if producers are gaining at the expense of consumers, and that could lead to things such as inequality. And this leads quite nicely into our last assumption that we're focusing on efficiency and not equity. So efficiency is the overall aggregate efficiency in the economy, not what is fair. So that's kind of links into this idea here of producer surplus and consumer surplus. So here we have the partial equilibrium. We have supply up here and we have demand down here. Let's take, for example, here. Here, supply equals demand. So if we track that across to this right-hand diagram here, we can form an import-demand curve. And we can say, well, since supply is equal to demand, there's zero imports. So let's take another example. Let's go down the price and say, here, what happens? Well, we're demanding D1, but we're only supplying S1 in the economy. So we need imports. Well, our import demand curve shows us how many imports we need. So we can track that down here, and we can say we're importing M1, and M1 is equal to D1 minus S1. Again, M1. So we're going to say that's the world price. And we're going to say that here on this diagram, X star is equal to the foreign export supply. The foreign export supply curve is horizontal because it says at the given price, this world price, an infinite amount of quantity will be supplied because we're in a perfectly competitive market. What happens when we increase the price? So we're going to increase from PW here, and we're going to apply a tariff, PW plus T. So T units is the tariff. What happens? So the foreign export supply curve shifts up. Why does it shift up? Because it's essentially an export supply curve is a marginal cost curve, and the marginal costs have increased by plus T units for every unit. So that curve shifts up. What happens on the left here then? So we've increased the price, so domestic suppliers love that, so they increase up the supply curve here to S2, and then the demand is reduced because the price is higher, so we have D2. So then we have a lower level of imports now. And again, we can track that along onto this diagram here, and we can say that that's M2 level of imports. So now we're just going to label the areas on this diagram to look at the welfare effects. So we have A, B, C, and D. On the right-hand diagram, we have C, and we have B plus D. And actually, these letters on the right are directly interchangeable with those letters on the left. So, for example, C. Why is C in this diagram here the same as C in this diagram here? Well, actually, we said that before, D2 minus S2 was the quantity of imports M2. And the difference in price, PW plus T minus PW, is the same difference in price on this diagram. So that's why, for example, C is the same. Why is B plus D the same? Because that's a welfare loss, and we will be looking at why B plus D is a welfare loss at the end of the video, but that will make more sense at the end. So we've got the diagrams all labelled up now. Let's look at the welfare effects. And we're going to start firstly by looking at the consumer surplus. Consumer surplus, very quickly, is the area bound by the demand curve and by the price. So as we can see, consumer surplus of an increase in PW to PW plus T is going to be negative because the price has increased. So consumers are hurt by this. And they're hurt by the area A plus B plus C plus D. So consumer surplus has fallen, so it's negative, by A plus B plus C plus D. What about producer surplus? We're going to label producer surplus as PS. So producers are going to gain from this because they're now getting a higher price from PW to PW plus T. And producer surplus is the area bound by the supply curve and the price. So the producer surplus has risen by area A. Quick note here, why do we see an increase in price when before we said that there was no change in price? The reason for this is because the tariff is applied at the border, so it's not influencing the international price, it's just affecting the price coming into that home market. So there's a fall in consumer surplus of A, B, C, D. There's a rise in producer surplus of plus A. And then what happens to tax revenue? So I'm going to put tariff revenue. Well, tariff revenue has increased because we have this level of imports and we have this level of a tariff. So that would equal area C. So tariff revenue to the government is C. Assuming that the government distributes this tariff revenue back to its people, we therefore can total up these overall effects. So we have A plus A and we have a negative A, so them two can cancel out. We have A plus C and a negative C, so those two can cancel each other out. And we get an overall deadweight loss of minus B minus D. And that's why in a small country case, the welfare effects of a tariff are negative. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and follow me on Facebook.